The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2021 NFL Draft running back profiles. If you want to find the wide receiver profiles and you're on YouTube, on Mayo Media Network, subscribe to that, by the way. You can find that in a separate video, profiling all the wide receivers. I feel like all we've done is talk about quarterbacks so far because that's easy to talk about. And for people who don't know anything about college football, like me, I can figure out the quarterbacks. Not necessarily who's going to be good and who's going to be bad, but I know the names. And that's usually good enough to pretend to have hot takes about things. But what I really want to dig into today, as a part of our NFL draft series, is Pat Mayo learning about the players that are going into the draft. I know that there's the people on Twitter, on the internet, who are like real, I know everything there's to know about college football. Most people don't. I myself am included in that. So I need to learn as much as possible. So you're going to have the running back profiles. You're going to have the wide receiver profiles, the NFL draft props, plus the mega 2001 NFL final version of the mock draft, which will all be coming out on the Pat Mayo Experience over the course of the next week. So if you like the NFL draft and you're just starting right now, this is the place you want to be. Remember to smash the like button for the episode. In the comment section, you tell me which running back you hope your team ends up drafting in this year's NFL draft, and subscribe to the newsletter in the description as well, because I'll have a few draft bets that are coming out, and that's probably where I'll end up putting them on Wednesday evening next week. Bringing in right now the first of many experts to be talking on the Pat Mayo Experience about the NFL draft this week, Emory Hunt at F-Ball Game Plan, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel Football Game Plan. You can find that in the description on YouTube. He's at CBS. He's doing color commentary for college football games. Emory Hunt, what's going on, man?
Not much, Pat, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Say that again?
I said nothing much, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. No, my earpiece fucked up for a second, so that wasn't good news. I was like, I can see the mouth moving, but I'm not hearing anything coming through. Hot start to NFL draft season. So can you give people who may not know you a little bit of a background on why you're the guy to talk to about running backs entering the NFL draft?
Well, number one, I'm a former college running back at University of Louisiana. I don't know if you can see my old jersey and helmet behind me, but also I've been scouting the position since 2007 when we started Football Game Plan. And like you talked about in the open, just been a color commentator on these college football games. So I've seen a lot of football, also covered the NFL, in addition to what I do at the collegiate level. So I've been around football, played it, coached it, scouted it. Now I cover it. So definitely one that has a little bit more insight at the running back position than most positions, obviously.
Once again, F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter if you want to follow Emory over on the Twitter machine to get some takes as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. I asked you this question last year, and now it seems that it's becoming more and more prevalent as teams start to go about the NFL draft of, are we going to see a running back in the first round? And we finally got there with the very last pick in the first round last year when Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up going to the Kansas City Chiefs. But it seems like people are not necessarily devaluing the position in terms of how important it is to have a good running back. They're just not willing to spend the draft capital because it really seems like there's not a huge gap between, the seventh best running back in terms of talent in the NFL and the 60th at this point, because it all depends on your offensive line, the scheme that you're in, to really highlight a lot of these players that a lot of GMs can say, you know what, we can mine 80% value from a fifth round pick than spending the draft capital on a first round pick. Are you seeing this more when it comes to NFL teams now?
I think teams are looking at the position in a sense of, can this guy impact the game? And if you can impact the game, those guys will always find a way in the first round. Think about guys like Christian McCaffrey or Adrian Peterson or Ezekiel Elliott. You also look at someone like Leonard Fournette. When he was coming out of LSU, his game-breaking ability just yielded itself to taking him high because that guy was a game breaker. Now, it didn't all the way pan out for him, but for the most part, if you're taking the back in the first round, you want someone that can be an explosive game breaker. So I think when you don't have those elements at the position, that's when you start to see teams say, all right, well, maybe we can get a solid back in the second, third, fourth round, so on and so forth. So for me, it's always about how quickly can you be a game breaker, how much of a game breaker are you at the position, and that determines how high you go at running back, as opposed to treating it like it's just a devalued position, because we all know if you have a back that can go 80, that's just as worth his weight in gold as is a receiver that can go 80 with his blazing speed, or a quarterback that could throw it 80 yards. So it's the same thing. And just in this draft class or other draft classes where you don't see backs go high, it's probably because they don't see them as traditional quote unquote game breakers. So they can kind of wait and take someone else who they feel as though is a game breaker.
Or they can try to save the money and patch together a full running back with 2 or 3 guys, whether there's a good pass blocker that can also receive out of the backfield, but not the strongest runner in between the tackles. We've just seen this over and over, that there are so few workhorse running backs at this point. And maybe that's a good thing for some of these guys, would you say? Just because the fewer the touches, the fewer the chances to get injured, and to keep some of these guys fresh. Like, there's just not a lot of Derrick Henrys around anymore.
Or you look at it in the sense that I got to use up 3 roster spots to fill one job. So if I find a guy that can do all 3 in one, I'm taking that guy high. So I think that's the other side of the argument you have to look at. But if you're a guy, I think nowadays we're seeing colleges, what we see in college, we see in the NFL. So yeah, we don't see too many, bell cow backs, so to speak, in the NFL. That's because we don't see too many bell cow situations at the collegiate level. We're seeing committees. Think about it. North Carolina has 2 backs that's in this draft class that split carries, and both are tremendous tailbacks. So they probably couldn't handle the load at the NFL level if you gave them a full slate of a 3-down backs carries, because they weren't built or trained to do that at the collegiate level. So it can go both ways. But I think because we're seeing it at the collegiate level, more committees across these teams, we're going to see more committees at the NFL level.
If you want a full breakdown of each of the skill position players in this draft, plus their player comps and where they might end up going and their perceived fantasy value going forward, I highly recommend Jeff Radcliffe's full preview. I had Radcliffe on last week, ftnfantasy.com. You can find it up there. Use code Mayo. Tell him Pat Mayo ended up sending you. I'll throw the link in the description of this video and podcast as well. You mentioned that they'll spend first-round draft capital if the guy is an actual talent, an actual game breaker, if that's going to be perceived. Plus, you also have to have a team who has a hole at running back. And the team that just kind of jumps out to me is the Steelers right now. Do you think that any of the running backs in this class fit the bill as a legit first-round talent?
What's interesting, and I'm glad you brought up Pittsburgh, because I think when you look at what a Pittsburgh Steelers running back looks like, it's kind of Najee Harris. He's kind of typecast as a Steeler back. You look at what left 2 years ago in Le'Veon Bell. You look at what left last year in James Conner. Najee Harris is about the same size and plays a lot like Le'Veon Bell anyway. So, yes, that would be the most ideal fit for a player in a position of need with a team that definitely appreciates the run game. And that would probably be the only guy I can see going in the first round. Otherwise, you probably look at a team like Miami, who has a glaring need at running back, but they may want to go with more speed. So you could put Travis Etienne in that conversation, or they may want someone that, is a good foundational player that can help take pressure off Tua Tagovailoa, and that's his old teammate in Najee Harris. So I could only see 2 guys going in the first based off the fit, but I think Najee Harris, if I had to bet money on it, he would be the one that just kind of is almost too good to happen, because it just makes too much sense with Pittsburgh.
I wanted to ask you about Travis Etienne. So you went to school in Louisiana. Etienne is from Louisiana. So are you from Louisiana too? Like, what are your ties to Louisiana?
I like to say I was born in the state of New Orleans. We consider New Orleans like DC. We consider New Orleans its own entity, and the rest of the state is Louisiana. But yeah, I was born in Louisiana. I was born in New Orleans.
So what people may not know about me, I'm from a place where, I'm Canadian. So where I am from, 200 years before I was born, they expelled all the French people from the province where I'm from, and they sent them down to Louisiana. So there's a huge French culture. I mean, people know that in Louisiana. So I've been really struggling with the last name pronunciation, because it feels like a French last name. I mean, Etienne is French for Stephen, but it gets like this weird Americanized version. Can you shed some light on this for me? Because I have a bet with someone of how it's actually pronounced.
I'm glad you said that, because everyone looks at me sideways because I pronounce it Etienne. When I'm pronouncing it the right way, the French way, because I'm from Louisiana, from New Orleans, where I knew more French than I knew anything. So yes, it is a French Creole Canadian name. It's Etienne, not Etienne.
And there it is. The Acadian tradition lives on down in New Orleans and somewhat still in Nova Scotia as well. Very limited. My grandmother's Acadian, so she was one of the last few who ended up sticking around. I don't know how she ended up making the cut, but apparently she did. Let's talk about him, though, because he could be a first-round pick. You say Miami. I've heard like Jamal Charles thrown around as like potential, not this player is Jamal Charles, but when you're looking at skill set, this is a smaller end guy, a guy who can receive but has blazing speed. Do you think that's a fair comp?
It's the speed is with Jamal Charles and also Etienne, but I think from a skill set perspective, he's more Marlon Mack. So if you can combine Marlon Mack's skill with Jamal Charles' speed, you have Travis Etienne. And I do like how he went back this year and worked on his receiving skill and got more acclimated in the passing game. So he became a more well-rounded player. And so you can see him as a first-round back because, again, he has that one thing that I love about, backs taken in the first round. You got to be able to hit the home run. And if you can hit it from, the minus 20-yard line or the 50-yard line when you're backed up and they just turn around and hand you the football, and you can go 80 yards or 50 yards and really break the game open, that's the type of player you want to take in the first round because there's not that many players with his level of speed and explosiveness at the position.
When we're thinking about, I'm just looking through all like I'm reading up on the draft rankings at running back, and it just seems to be all big school guys. I mean, that makes sense. They have the giant recruiting classes. So like Clemson, Alabama, you talk about the 2 North Carolina guys, Trey Serman from Ohio State. Are there small school guys that you think are real values in this draft just because of the weird year in college football? Obviously, some teams didn't play the full complement of games or some guys sat out, that scouting might be off on some of these smaller school guys who could be really good?
Yeah, when you look at the mid-major level, let's say the schools at the FBS level that are outside the top, outside the Power 5. So you're talking about UL Monroe, my Louisiana Raging Cajuns. You also talk about the University of Buffalo. All 3 schools have tremendous tailbacks. And I mentioned those schools in particular because you look at Josh Johnson out of UL Monroe, fantastic tailback, good balance, good burst, good vision. You go back and watch his game against Florida State in 2019. He lit up the Seminoles. Louisiana has 2 outstanding tailbacks, and Elijah Mitchell, who's a tremendous receiver, downfield threat in the passing game with tremendous speed, and Trey Regis, who's a short yardage goal line runner. I think he's going to be a touchdown monster in the league. He's kind of like Jordan Howard. So you got 2 backs coming from that Raging Cajun program. And also at Buffalo, Jarrett Patterson, terrific ball carrier, and this is a guy that's about 5'6", 200 pounds, but he was able to handle a full 3-down load at Buffalo, had games where he ran for 400 yards in one game, one week, 300 the next week. He was just outstanding for the Bulls and has been since he got on campus. So this is one of those backs that has proven he can handle volume if need be, but definitely is going to be more along the lines of being a complimentary guy at the next level. So it's a great year, in my opinion, for a group of 5 backs because there's a lot of talent at the mid-major level in the FBS.
So Harris and Etienne are like tier 1 running backs. Is there another running back in this class that you would put into that tier? Like, is one of the North Carolina guys up that far?
Absolutely, Michael Carter. His elusiveness is elite. When you have the ability to make people miss at the rate that he does, you become essentially your own blocker. So he's doing a great job of, having his feet and eyes in unison. He's making a lot of plays front side to back side. Once he gets to the second level, he's making guys miss in the hole, and people will focus on his size, but you can't hit him to get a good lick on him to hurt him. So, that's the difference about a guy in Michael Carter, who I believe has elite level traits to where you can feel comfortable with him high second round, or even how the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, late in the first. He would be the only other guy that I would feel comfortable with taking in the first round because of that elite trait of being able to make guys miss.
So what sort of player that's currently in the NFL do you think would be a decent comp for him? Someone like, I don't know, Austin Eckler?
I would say Darrell Henderson.
Oh.
Darrell Henderson had that same type of shiftiness and burst, even though he's a little bit more elusive than Henderson, but they still have that same get out of dodge speed because once they hit a crease, they can really go. And to me, once you find backs that can be consistent 25 to 30-yard burst type guys, you're doing okay in a run game. And someone like Michael Carter, and you look at Darrell Henderson, and when he's healthy, out there in that Rams backfield. He just provides a different level of energy in the run game.
So you're one of the few people I've heard with Carter over Williams in this kind of spot. What is it with Williams, and where do you project him to go necessarily? Not necessarily in the draft, but like what's a good fit for him in the NFL?
I think he's more of a complimentary guy. I think he's more of a guy that you want to pair up with the Michael Carter, right? So I think he's someone that the reason why I have Carter ahead of him, I think Williams takes on too much contact. There are no 18 or 19-year-olds in the NFL. You can't just keep running through everybody, right? You have to be able to make people miss. These are grown men that are out there trying to, feed their families and provide, generational wealth for the rest of their family. So you can't be out there thinking you're just going to run through somebody like the tape at the finish line. You got to be able to make guys miss. And that's a big key. His vision is okay. It's not great. It's not terrible, but it's just okay. So he has some limitations in my opinion, but he has good burst, good explosiveness. I see him as a second round player. But I know some people have him higher than that, but I just feel like he's someone that you could probably pair up with another tailback and get the best of both worlds. Let's say you send him out there to Buffalo, where you're with Devin Singletary or a Zach Moss and you have Javonte Williams out there in your run game. Now you have someone that can really provide outstanding value to the offense and to the backfield.
Trey Serman from Ohio State also being talked up as a part of that like upper crust of the tier 2 at running back in terms of talent. Can't figure out exactly what he does way better than everyone else though. Just like when you watch him play, he seems just very solid at everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's solid at everything. I see him more along the lines of a TJ Yeldon type. The one special trait that Serman has that I really was impressed with watching him back at Oklahoma and then at Ohio State, his footwork. I mean, he has some classy feet, man. You talk about someone that can really, pick and slide his way through the line of scrimmage, pick and slide his way through the trash, and always is falling forward. You rarely see him take a loss because his footwork gets him out of a jam. So with that level of footwork and ability to make guys miss or make decisions quickly pre-line of scrimmage, that gives him the ability to have a lot of success, like we saw him do at Oklahoma and also at Ohio State toward the back end of the season.
If we were to throw some of the running backs from last year's class in with this year's class, how do you think they would stack up? Because obviously Jonathan Williams, very good. Cam Akers, very good. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he got banged up. And then I think that the fantasy value that people talked about with him kind of made it impossible for him to live up to any sort of expectation. The bar was set so high for the productivity that he was supposed to put through in year one. It just never really came to fruition. That if you put, let's say, just those three guys back in this year's draft, would they be the three best guys? Would they be numbers like 3, 4, and 5 compared to Etienne and Harris?
I would say Taylor would be number 1. Taylor had the speed that Najee Harris does not. Najee Harris has good speed. Taylor has great speed. And so I think Taylor would have been number 1. Clyde Edwards-Helaire would have been about number 4, right behind Etienne, or competing for 3 with Etienne. And I believe Akers would have been down around, somewhere around 9 or something, competing with Trey Serman. Akers was a good player, but just wasn't that spectacular runner. He didn't have the natural vision that you want to see from the tailback position, but good all-around skills. As a good receiver, good value player there. He was versatile because he was a former high school quarterback. So I just think that his vision needed to get a little bit more up to speed than what it was coming out of Florida State.
So if we look at the rest of the running backs that are projected to go potentially at the end of day 1, maybe early on day 2, you have like Gainwell, Hubbard, Jefferson, Hill, Mitchell. Do you have a preference between any of these guys?
Jamar Jefferson is outstanding. He was terrific as a high school running back. I was shocked to see him go to Oregon State because you don't normally see tailbacks of that caliber go to Oregon State, and he was paying dividends right off the bat as a freshman. And this past year, he showed some Kareem Hunt type ability where he has good acceleration, man. He's like almost Aaron Jones, like in how he's able to weave through, the line of scrimmage and find his way out on a corner and getting down the field with the speed. So I'm a big fan of him. He's actually my 5th running back in this class right after Pooka Williams out of Kansas, who I think is another one of these scat backs that's terrific. You talk about vision, speed, explosiveness. That's Pooka Williams. And Colin Hill is another one. Colin Hill to me is more like Cam Akers. He's solid all around game, not nothing overly spectacular, but gets the job done. It can help you on both ends of offense. And Chuba Hubbard obviously has the legit sprinter speed, but I think he's probably more fit to serve in a complementary role. I would love to see him in San Francisco with the outside zone scheme and allow him to get the corner, turn it, and then get down the sideline.
What role can someone like Kenneth Gainwell play in the NFL? Is it like a third down James White type role?
I believe so. I think that's a little bit more of where he's going to be typecast. And I think when you look at him and Louisville's tailback, Javian Hawkins, they're one and the same. They're both speed guys. Again, I hate using the same team, but you see them in San Francisco, how they are able to cycle through backs and play well with those type guys. I think that's an area where you'll see them have their level of productivity. So let's say if you're Gainwell and you go to somewhere like Philadelphia where you're paired up with Miles Sanders, then you have a really good functional dynamic backfield. I think that's along the lines where he would be able to thrive in situations like that.
So you mentioned Jared Patterson from earlier of the mid-majors from Buffalo. Are there any running backs that we haven't talked about yet that you think that could just, whether it's signing as an undrafted free agent or potentially going 5th, 6th, 7th round, that with the right opportunity could really make an impact either this year or potentially next year in the NFL?
There's a couple of guys too. CJ Marable out of Coastal Carolina, who another mid-major guy that really stepped up this year, big time for the Chanticleers. He has, I would say, tremendous acceleration. Another one of these guys, kind of like Kenneth Gainwell, that can be paired up with someone. And also, you look at the University of Virginia, Shane Simpson. I covered a lot of his games at Towson, and he was a terrific, versatile player as a kickoff returner, punt returner, running back, receiver. He transfers to Virginia this year because Towson punted on their season to play in the spring, and he didn't play in the spring because of obviously because of COVID. So he was able to go up a level and show the NFL scouts that he had recovered from the injury and hadn't lost his speed or explosiveness. So he's a track guy that can play multiple positions and is another one of these downfield threats in the passing game.
So he could be Cordero Patterson obviously has a ton of size, but almost a Swiss Army knife type player where they can play special teams, put them out at receiver on the outside, or potentially do some reverses or even line them up in the backfield at the same time. I feel like those gadget guys who can do multiple things are really undervalued still.
Yeah, they're very undervalued. And yeah, he's a running back first, but also can do other things. And, because that's where he differs from Patterson. Patterson was a receiver first, and I still think he's a receiver always, but gets carries in the backfield because it just doesn't have the natural vision and feel for the running back position. He's just an athlete that you're putting back there in the backfield and handing the football off because he gets stuffed every time you try to, use him as a running back. But when you use him in a gadgety situation where you create space for him to make it seem like a kickoff return, a punt return, that's when he has the biggest gains. And so Simpson is someone that is a tailback first, but also let's say you want to get two tailbacks on the field, you throw him in a slot and he's just as good as a receiver because he could run really good routes. So
he could be someone like maybe not to the extent of, but this in a similar fashion of the way that Carolina used Curtis Samuel last year.
Sort of, yeah. I would say that is probably more apt than someone like Patterson.
Okay. Emory Hunt, you can check out all of his work up at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter, obviously the YouTube channel, Football Game Plan. Tell everyone what you got going on this week because I assume you're working like 15 hours a day.
Well, firstly, they can get a copy of my 2021 NFL Draft Guide. I printed my copy out. This is over 600 scouting reports and individual scouting reports. Everyone has their own scouting report. So it looks like this. So you get all my scouting notes on every prospect in this draft, guys that'll be on the roster that you'll see get cut or sign in on the practice squad or in training camp. You will have a pretty good idea on the prospect. So over 600 scouting reports, individual scouting reports, full color pages on PDF. So you get the PDF copy. If you want to be brave and print it out like I did, do so. But PDF copy, you can get your edition at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide.
All right, so footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide. You should have led with that. That should have been the first thing you said off the top of the show. I will cut this clip and make it the social media clip so everyone knows where to go to get this, okay?
Absolutely. You didn't ask. And so I'm a terrible businessman. But so when people see that draft guide, you will be well prepared for everyone that's going to get drafted, that's going to get signed, that's going to find themselves traded or not traded. And when your team signs someone and everyone is saying, who the hell is this guy? Just go through the draft guide and we will have a scouting report on him.
All right, Emory Hunt, thanks for being on the show, man. Coming up the rest of the week, the mock draft, the wide receiver profiles, the prop bets, and probably just some general conversation. Then I'll have a few with my idiot friends as we give our non-specific takes or poorly researched takes on the NFL draft, because who doesn't love that sort of stuff? It's going to be with Cust, put it that way. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. Subscribe to the newsletter, smash a like, and subscribe to Mayo Media Network on YouTube. Until next time, I'm Pat Mayo. See you then.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!